from the word go. So,
Okay, so
but
I'm ready. Let's go.
okay. All right, Mike, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much. I know you're up in Montreal. I'm coming out of Kansas City, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about your book and your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
Yeah, yes, sir. So before we get into your book and your life, I want to know first and foremost, 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out this pandemic, how we were going to get through it, and all of the ramifications, timetable and stuff. How did you get through that time period, and how did it change the way that you live your life now?
You know, there's a thing that is called a dual perspective, and you always have to think that there are always two economies. There's the world economy, what's going on around you, and there's your personal economy. And they don't have to be necessarily the same. And sometimes, people just go with the flow in terms of what's going on the outside, but sometimes it's completely different. In my case, I was already working remotely, and at that time, I was actually focusing on a different part of my business where I had some programs to help people lose weight with hypnosis. And it was actually a great time for me because people being stuck at home, well, guess what? They just went go and eat and then gain some weight. So it was actually a great thing. But the reality is that shortly after that, I actually pivoted my life mission. So if you allow me, I'm going to tell you why I'm on the show today and how things changed for me. So there's a saying that your wounds are your gift. And what I'm going to share today is the result of 2 decades of expertise and 5 long years of misery. They were not related to the pandemic. They were related to the fact that I have been in a business 50-50 business partnership for 10 years. The first 5 years of my life in that partnership were great, but the second 5 years were grueling, were horrible. Why? Because that's when we started having different points of views. The economy was changing. We needed to adapt the way we would work together. And with my business partner, it became very, very clear that he had some values, I had different ones. We were starting to having daily arguments up to the point that we were screaming in front of our employees, feeling bad about that. But I wasn't sure, is he right? Am I wrong? And I realized that with hindsight, the biggest problem was not being in a bad relationship because he's not a bad person. We're just different. The biggest problem I was facing then was indecision. It's a huge problem. Being stuck in indecision is a pain that most people do not comprehend if they have not experienced it. And I say that being stuck in indecision is like chronic pain. Some days are worse, some days are better, but overall your quality of life is just miserable and it gets worse with time. I couldn't sleep. I was constantly second guessing myself. Is it me? Is it him? And finally, when I hit my 50th birthday 3 years ago, I decided to do a life review. And that's when I realized that all the good decisions I had made, I had followed a very specific process, but not for that decision for some reason. And when I applied my own medicine, I went from being anxious, burned out, not knowing what to do, to all of a sudden, I was aligned. My head was aligned with my heart, was aligned with my gut. I knew what to do, which was leave the relationship, which was not easy. I had to sell an asset to buy my associate out, but I had that peace of mind that it was the right decision. And after that, I said, I'm onto something here. And my spouse's brother was a medical doctor and he needed to make some very important decisions. And he had been stuck in anxiety for 2 years and he couldn't make up his mind. And I worked with him. I applied my improved version of my own process. And in 2 hours, Joe, he went from being stuck in anxiety, in nausea, to having absolute clarity. And he told me, I was stuck for 2 years in a pitch dark room and I was bumping against the furniture. And it's as if you turn the light on. So that's when I knew I was onto something revolutionary. And I pivoted my life mission. And now I'm working to share this revolutionary process to make complex, high cost of failure decisions, and especially focusing with women considering divorce so they can make the right decision with confidence, because divorce, it's one of the toughest decisions a human being can make.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If here in 2024, if I put you in front of a bunch of third grade students and it's career day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How would you answer that child?
I would say, have you ever been in a place where you're not sure which career to choose and there are pros and cons, or maybe you want to get a Christmas present, but you have several in mind and you don't know and you're stuck in indecision? Well, guess what? I help people stuck in the same problem like you have been experiencing find out what is truly important to you, in what order, and find a way to feel at peace with your decision so that no matter what happens, you know it's the right decision. So I help people make complex, important life decisions.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Oh, you're taking me a long way back there. I probably astronaut or something along those lines. So it's not in the third grade that I knew what I wanted to do. It was more towards the mid-teenage years that I knew that I was absolutely passionate about psychology and self-improvement. So yeah.
So take me back to where you were born and raised and how you got to this point. How did you acquire the skill set? How did you get to this point in your life? What were some of the seminal seeds that were planted into you to grow into who you are?
So I was born and raised in Europe. I lived in 5 different countries before moving to Canada. And I lived in Spain, in France, in Italy, in England, in the United States. And I grew up with my mom and grandmother. My father was the businessman, very successful. I would see him only during the summer vacations or Christmas vacations. And as I said, I was passionate about psychology, but it was my father's way or the highway. So when the time came for me to make a decision in terms of careers and studies, I had to follow his path, which was you have to study business and economics. That's the real thing, psychology, forget about that. So I did. And when the time came for me to graduate, I started actually working in investment banking and management consulting because I wanted to prove myself for my own merits, not because I was the son of the boss, quote unquote. And then something happened, which is my father, who was 78 years old at the time, married a woman who was 22 years old. She was younger than me. I will let you guess her motivations, right? And at that point, one day he called me on the phone. He said, "Hey, Mike, I have a new life. I have a new wife. I don't want to know anything about you anymore. Good luck, goodbye." And he hung up. And that was the darkest point in my life. I felt that the worst thing that could happen to me happened. And it did. It was horrible. I was in darkness, in depression. I had to take care of my mom, of my grandmother. I had barely started working as an adult. But as time went by, I was in touch with my father, and I had a couple of conversations until one day I realized that, you know what? He's never going to change. And you know that there's a saying that disappointment requires adequate planning. That's because whenever we expect something, we need to build those expectations in order for us to be disappointed. And I realized that, the human being has an incredible ability to be in denial and hope that things will change for the better. And for more than 20 years, I had hope that my father, yes, he's not a good father, but one day he will become a good father. But when I understood that it would never happen, I totally changed careers. I decided to go and study for psychology in the United States. And I didn't have the money to do that. I had to pay for tuition to take care of myself, of my family. And I could spend a whole other episode in terms of how I made that happen. But to make it shorter, I ended up doing a master's in psychology at Yale, and then working in the field of personal development, neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, helping people quit smoking, lose weight, and so on, mostly with the French audience. But as I mentioned after that, within those 2 decades, I got into that business partnership. And then I had that experience that completely transformed my life and life mission because I realized that, in a way, everything has led me to this point where I have figured out how to help people make decisions. I suffered for 5 long, grueling years. Let's make those suffering years count so that I can help other people avoid the same suffering. Does that answer your question,
Yeah,
Joe?
100% answers my question. And I'm curious, who's been a hero for you, an inspiration in your life?
You asked very interesting questions, very different from the other podcasts. So I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I have a specific role model. I would say that what saved my life was the books that I read. I did not have necessarily the best dad or the best mom. I have totally forgiven them. So this is another talk that we could have. But the reality is that in terms of educating myself or doing what I thought would be right, was a combination of reading books, because the beauty about books is you can have as many mentors as you read books, right? And then applying those lessons and uh, kind of seeing the results of what you're doing and applying that with your life. So I was also blessed to go through a lot of personal development. I will say that NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, was incredibly helpful for me to understand myself, to understand others, to communicate better, to make personal change. So I don't necessarily have one role model. There are certainly people that I look up to in terms of values, like Nelson Mandela. He's a man who decided to sacrifice himself for the greater good of humanity, right? I mean, 27 years in prison just blows my mind to think that somebody could be so committed. I listened to another podcast called How I Build This, and RJ Scaringe, he is the founder of this company called Rivian, the electric cars. I mean, this is just like a spur of the moment thing, but what impressed me is that his vision, in terms of, since he was a kid, he said, I'm going to build um, a car company, which is crazy because it does require billions of dollars. But I would say that people who are in it for a vision, for making the world a better place, and who have a passion and who follow their values, which is really also what this decision-making process that I created is about, understanding what's important to you and making sure that you are being aligned and authentic.
So if you could meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Hmm. So it has to be somebody who's aiming for a huge impact on the planet.
Yeah.
Elon Musk is kind of the obvious answer. That's why I don't want to go there. But definitely, whether you like his works or not, because nobody's perfect, you cannot deny that he has a vision to help humanity at a scale that has rarely been seen. So, man, you're catching me off guard. So alive, Nelson Mandela is not alive anymore.
That we could open it up to ghosts. That's fine. We could do that.
Nelson Mandela is certainly someone that I admire and respect greatly because of the sheer magnitude of the sacrifice that he made in order to be fully aligned with his values. And then also for the message that he shared, when he was released from prison, he realized that if he did not forgive the people who put him in jail, it would defeat the purpose. He would still be in a prison, emotional prison of resentment. So that was an extraordinary human being that impacted and inspired other leaders after that.
Yeah.
So definitely, his ghost and his soul.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, his story is always astounding. After 27 years to see the world change the way that you hoped it would, had to have been just mind-blowing, you know? So I'm curious for you and your mission and with the work you do, what gets you up every day? What gets you to do the work that you do, to do it at a high level, and to also evolve as a human being? What is that collective gas in your tank?
Have you ever watched a great movie and then you feel so enthusiastic about it? You love it so much that you go and tell all your friends, hey, Peter, come and you have to watch this movie or a great book. Have you ever had that feeling?
Yeah.
That's exactly what gets me up in the morning. And the analogy that I use is I used to be in a prisoner of war camp where life was miserable and I was mistreated and so on by the circumstances. And then one day I found a way out to escape that prison. That prison. I dug a hole, found a way out of the maze, and now it's like I'm coming back inside the prisoner of camp, and I say, "Hey, psst, psst, come over here. Let me show you. I have found a way out. Let me take you to freedom." Right? And so knowing that whenever I work with a client or whenever I am in a podcast or getting a comment from an email from somebody who read my book, that, you helped me tremendously. I was in pain and suffering and now my life has improved. I mean, those are the things that truly matter in life. This is so nourishing, and being able to be part of the team of light to make the world a better place, serve others, really makes you happy at a higher level than any material good, or which are necessary, all the material success. I'm not denying those. But whenever you go and serve and have that kind of impact, that's to me the highest thing you could be doing.
So of all of the business adventures and years that you've been doing your work, what has been one particular case or one particular year where you grew the most, where it was hard yet it was satisfying? Was there a period like that in your professional growth?
I will say this last 8 years, meaning the first 5 of those 8 years were the grueling part, all the pain, which I did not realize would make me who I am today. But it was really this huge gift, completely disguised as something horrible, that then enabled me to spend the last 3 years spreading the word or sharing with the world this revolutionary system that I made to really make grueling decisions and improving your life. So I would say that the combination of going through that and writing the book, by the way, it took me a lot of time and effort. It was both the most difficult project I worked on as well as the most satisfying and gratifying, because it's, you know, you have to take all your knowledge, your thinking, codify it, explain it in a way that makes sense. But once I got through that, the end result was incredibly satisfying, not only because I did it, but also because I saw the impact that it had on other people. So I would say probably this last year, having written the book and now starting to talk about it, has been one of the best years of my life, which has been the hardest or very hard, but in a good way.
So in your book, you're giving out a lot of good anecdotes and advice, so to speak, to people. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
That I've ever gotten from other people.
Yeah.
I would say it's not necessarily something that I got from other people, but something that I discovered through this process that I went through. It's about understanding who you truly are, what is truly important to you, your values, and being in alignment, being authentic with your values. And this is, you know, the values and the things that are important to you define your identity. There's no other human being, Joe, on this planet who has the same values, the same things that are important to them than who you are. And if you deny those things, if you're not in alignment with them, you are denying the possibility to express your gifts, your full potential. And being out of alignment with your values, it's absolutely terrible. And being in alignment with your values, it's like having all the, you know, the most beautiful sports car being exactly where it needs to be in terms of gear, speed, revs. I mean, I'm not even sure I'm using the proper analogy, but when everything is aligned with your head, with your heart, and with your gut, you feel different. It almost doesn't matter what happens in the end, because you just know you're doing the right thing. And this kind of inner peace is the most important thing.
So of all of the things that you've done and accomplished in your career and in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I will say what I'm doing right now. It's not because it's the most recent, but it's because there's a reason I changed my life mission to pivot and to share this process, because it has made such a tremendous difference in my life. And it's so new and unique and revolutionary. And it gives you this inner alignment that I just talked about. It's like all my life makes sense now. Everything has converged. You know, Steve Jobs said that you can only connect the dots with hindsight. And now I feel that all the dots are being connected. Everything that happened to me happened for a reason. And now I get to understand what the reason is, and act from that reason.
So if you had a dream tonight, ran into like the 18-year-old version of yourself, and you could give that young version a piece of advice based on the life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained, what advice would you give your younger self? And would that version of you listen?
That's a good point. I'm not sure he would listen, because he was so caught in his own emotional turmoil and fear of abandonment and his own personal story, that he may not have been in a good position to receive that advice. You know, there's a saying, whenever the student is ready, the master appears. So you need also to be ready to receive the wisdom. The wisdom that I would share with that 18-year-old is, first of all, you have so much more value that you can even begin to fathom. And you can make such a difference in other people's lives. And just follow your heart, your excitement, and your values, because that's the key to a fulfilling life, that is a life of service and the life of fulfillment.
So at the end of the day, Mike, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, all of your readers, everyone that knows you, but you ultimately drive the bus. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Sorry, because your questions are so amazing. I love this interview. So can
Excellent.
you just rephrase it to give me a different
Yeah.
perspective on this one?
Yeah, because we all have these roles in our life, like as an author or as somebody, a company guy or a family guy or somebody in a friend situation. There's all these roles that we play in our lives collectively, and we
Right.
interact with all these bubbles of people. But ultimately, we're the ones that lead the march. We project all of that. What is your perception of what you're projecting to the world?
I project care and wanting to make the world a better place. It sounds trivial, but I have this philosophy that whenever I meet someone, I want them to be better off after having met me. Whether it's going to the supermarket and telling the cashier that she has a nice outfit, or that she has a nice smile, even the smallest things, if I can make somebody else's life a little bit better, that's great. Or even if I go to a place that's messy, I can pick something and put it in the trash just because it will make it better. So I will say I am the person who wants to make a positive difference, and I really care. And yeah.
So as an author and with so many books behind you, I gotta know, when you were young, what was the book that you loved the most? What was that seminal book in your life?
So if there's one book that I would take with me on a deserted island, and that was just a huge influence in my life, is Illusions by Richard Bach. And that book really inspired me. You know, he's the author of Jonathan Livingstone Seagull. And that book talks about the fact that you are a powerful spiritual being having human experiences and not the other way around. It talks about the fact that if you have a dream, you are given the means to pursue it, even though you will have to work for it. And there's a couple of quotes that come back, and one of them is, "How do you know if your life on Earth? Sorry, how do you know if your mission on Earth is finished or not?" And the answer is, if you're still alive, it isn't. So that book to me was just a way to expand my mind, to remind me or to make me understand that there's more than appears to the eye, that we have a spiritual side, and that really we are just incredible human beings that can achieve much more than we may think initially. So that's the book. Illusions, Richard Bach is
Yeah.
one of my heroes.
So let me ask you this. If you could get into a time machine, we get off this call and a time machine pulls up, and you can go anywhere in human history and see one event with your own eyes, where are you gonna go?
You said to see one event with my
Yeah.
own eyes.
Yeah.
It's funny. I've never thought about it this way. And the first answer that came to me was, I would go back to the moment Jesus made the miracle of multiplying the bread, loaves, and the fish, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's because you asked me this question right after I've talked about the book Illusions and the fact that we are powerful creators. So obviously, to me, he was a very enlightened spiritual human being. And I consider myself being very spiritual, not religious. But it would be to go to meet one of the enlightened, enlightened human beings.
Yeah.
In fact, there's another question that you didn't ask me, but I'm going to ask it for myself and for the benefit of the audience is, if a genie could grant you a wish, one wish, what would it be? And a lot of times people think, oh, $1 billion or gazillion or whatever, or, oh, I would want to have as many wishes as I want. And one day I heard an answer which just resonated with me is, I wish to be enlightened.
Yeah.
So if I have the chance to meet somebody who has been enlightened, then that would be it.
That's very intuitive because we always look at the pie in the sky, but as we all know, everything in life that is really important is usually right in front of you. And enlightenment is definitely a part of it because a part of it is wisdom, and you have to be alive on this planet long enough to accumulate that. So if you could get that pixie dust thrown at you, it would be a really good thing, you know? So, hey, this has been wonderful. Before we get out of the door here, I want to know if anyone wants to pick up your book, they want to reach out, they want to learn more about the good work you're doing. Where's the best all in one place to go?
Thanks, Joe. So I have written a book called Divorce Decision Decoded, and the best way to reach me is at divorcedecisiondecoded.com. So it's the title of my book.com. You'll be able to get the book. Right now, you also get the chance at the time of this recording to get the audio version for free as a bonus. And you'll also be able to email me, contact me if you want to find out about different ways to work with me. And if you make a search about Mike Fink divorce, I'll probably have my LinkedIn profile show up. But divorcedecisiondecoded.com is the best place to reach me. And most of all, for you to take a small action to transform your life to the better, I even give a 1-year full money back guarantee just because I want people to have a better life.
Absolutely.
So that's it.
That's wonderful. Mike, this has been great. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your passion, and best of luck with everything. Keep doing the wonderful work.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe. It was a true unexpected pleasure, unexpected in terms of the quality of the questions and of the interview. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.